everything going on is to stop what is coming. They can no longer control the outcome or narrative. Unfortunately, the country's been drugged into a cover-up to stop the mass arrests that are coming for senior elite. It's an insurrection, no longer just protest. The Republic is in the greatest peril since the Civil War. A grand coalition of its enemies is taking advantage of the weakness and frustration all created by the lockdown of the economy and ordinary life. The protest triggered by video of the lethal, barbaric cruelty of a then police officer and the economic desperation and frustration that has multiplied over a quarter century of the deindustrialization and widening class divisions as globalization has transformed our economy. Basically, the selling out of our country. Heather McDonald, one of the wisest and best informed commentators on our law and justice systems, sees the breakdown in the rule of law that threatens us with anarchy. Said, quote, "Savagery is spreading with lightning speed across the United States, with murderous assaults on police officers and civilians and the ecstatic annihilation of businesses and symbols of the state. Welcome to a real civilization-destroying pandemic, one that makes the recent saccharine exhortations to stay safe and the deployment of police officers to enforce outdoor mask wearing seem like decadent bagatelles." The key moment was when the mayor of Minneapolis surrendered the city's 3rd precinct police station to the mob. It was much a signal to the mob as the storming of the Bastille was to the French revolutionaries. This particular form of viral chaos was inevitable, given the failure of Minneapolis's leaders to quell the city's growing mayhem. Now, you can call me crazy, conspiracy all day long, but you can't tell me this doesn't make you feel some kind of way. The Floyd event was staged. I'm not saying racism doesn't exist, but hear me out. Staged event? False flag in the making? These officers were involved with something. I'm not sure exactly what yet, but something is just not adding up. I think there is at the very least the possibility that this was a filmed public execution of a black man by a white cop with the purpose of creating racial tensions and driving a wedge in the growing group of anti-deep state sentiment from the common people that has been propagated up against you, that have already been psychologically traumatized by the COVID-19 fears and the lockdown over the last few months. Historically, in election years and in politically contested areas or in groups, racial or gun violence incidents are becoming commonplace. Considering the rising approval rating of President Donald Trump in and within the black community, and an event like this was unfortunately predictable. Consider these points and contrast them to every other police brutality incident you've ever seen. The filmed portion of the incident was about 10 minutes long. In that amount of time, 3 officers are holding one handcuffed man down. You only know that because of the picture taken from across the street. You can't see the other 2 officers in the video because they're behind the vehicle. During 8 minutes of the entire video, the officer has his knee on George Floyd's neck, which is not taught or approved by any other law enforcement agency that I know of. Additionally, other than the Asian officer speaking occasionally to the crowd of bystanders, there is no communication from any of the officers to Mr. Floyd. No talking, no shouting, no nothing. When have you ever seen a police brutality video without police shouting? Additionally, the police had no goal. They weren't trying to subdue him for an arrest. He was already handcuffed, and all they needed to do at this point was to place him in the back of the squad car. There is no plausible explanation for taking him to the ground and having 3 men on top of a handcuffed man, a knee placed to the back of his neck. Mr. Floyd presented no threat and was not resisting from the 8 minutes that I could witness. The only goal that there appeared to be was exactly what happened: to be filmed brutally killing a black man. Think about this. These officers did not care about being filmed. In fact, the officer stared into the camera with soulless, dead eyes and an emotionless face, reminiscent of an assassin, a mind-controlled MK Ultra victim, as he knowingly killed an American citizen. Talk about crazy. None of these officers spoke amongst themselves, nor did they speak to Mr. Floyd. They did not respond to his pleas for life. They just sat and kneeled on him until he was passed out, and then waited an additional 4 minutes after Mr. Floyd lost consciousness to ensure that Mr. Floyd was dead and could not be revived. The bystanders are verbally communicating to the officers that he isn't breathing. Unlike any other similar incident, you never see the officers getting on police radios. You never see or hear them calling dispatch for backup. No other officer units police arrive on the scene, and strangely enough, the crowd does not seem to grow either. The scene does not end until an ambulance arrives and they are unceremoniously flop him on the gurney. At no point does anyone in the uniform ever check his vitals, as if they aren't even remotely curious about the situation that they just arrived upon, or concerned. And by the way, who called the ambulance and for what reason? Because if the reason was that Mr. Floyd was having a medical issue, they wouldn't have been still crushing his neck. Shortly after the video went viral, a fake Facebook page supposedly belonging to the officer at the center of the murder appears, and pictures are uploaded that say "Stand Your Ground" and Trump 2020. A picture of the cop with a red ball cap that says "Make America White Again." A friends list populated with obvious sock accounts and people clearly not his friends. This is the same kind of fake Facebook stunt that happened with a group that made to look like support for the man involved with the Ahmaud Arbery case, if we remember that. Is it mere coincidence that this happens the week after race becomes a major political issue, after the Biden "you ain't black" gaffe started to threaten the black vote the Democrats so desperately count on? Additionally, there is a substantial video evidence to arrest at least one officer now, which they finally did. Why would the local authorities not charge him immediately, unless there was a political advantage to not doing so? And is it a mere coincidence that this happens right about the exact moment that the COVID-19 fear campaign has been falling apart, and after it has psychologically traumatized the entire nation and got everyone at each other's throats and suicide attempts are at a spike? Is it mere coincidence that this happens after the Ahmaud Arbery case, which somehow eluded to the mainstream media completely until 2 whole months after he was killed? When has that ever happened? Timing issues? Is it a mere coincidence that the supreme race baiter Obama was making a video a few weeks ago connecting COVID with systemic racism? And finally, this entire scene plays out with the cop car and the license plate that says "Police." The plate was perfectly framed for maximum subliminal impact. This also means he was literally just 1 foot away from the backseat of the police car, and these cops thought it was smarter to kill a black man on camera than to pick him up and move him 1 foot into the back of the police squad car. You can draw your own conclusions, like we encourage here at the Patriot Hour, but this appears to have all the earmarks of a George Soros pandemic into systemic racism to get our country into the position that it is, that you're seeing unfold on the video screen in front of you. Please open your eyes dark to light, love and light. Thanks to Chris Tanner for all his hard research. Please share this video. Again, I am Michael. This is the Patriot Hour. God bless and Godspeed to each and every one of you. And where we go one, we go all.